Hello guys, so today we're going to be covering how to checkmate with the knight and the bishop. This is one of the hardest checkmates that there is, and most people do not know how to do this. And as a result, they end up drawing in these positions when they could have easily won. So today I'm going to show you how you can checkmate easily in a simple process that you can follow, and you can practice this over and over again so that you become better at it. So the first step that you have to follow is restriction. Restriction with the king. The pieces are going to play a role like the bishop, but mostly it's the king. You restrict on these squares f3, f6, c6, and c3. These are the squares where king belongs. You'll see in a minute why this is important. And secondly is the bishop. You need to understand what color bishop do you have. If you have a light square bishop, that means that your opponent is likely going to be running into the darker squares. So the dark square corners, that's where they are likely to go to. So as a result, you have to place your piece in such a way that it restricts your opponent adequately enough for them to not come to those dark squares. So obviously, their initial instinct will be, let me run to the darker square corners. And that is exactly what you want. It makes even the game and checkmating much easier. The second step is extraction with the knight. So your opponent is likely to go in the opposite corner as your bishop. So in this case, you're going to use the knight to extract their piece. So your knight belongs on these squares. So you're likely to put your knight on this square so that you can extract your opponent's king. Where you place the knight depends on where you're going to put your bishop. So let's say you want to extract your opponent in this side of the board. So you want to bring them to h1. If you want to do that, you're going to place your bishop on d5, restrict them from coming to this square, and then you're going to place your knight on g6. The third step will be to zigzag with your knight. So in this particular case, you have to zigzag in this particular fashion. As you zigzag, you have to restrict your opponent. So in this case, you're going to zigzag back and forth and restrict your opponent. You're going to do this with both your king and your bishop. As your opponent moves towards the light square diagonal, you're going to use your bishop to restrict them from going back to the dark square, and your king from stopping them from coming forward. So you have to keep them on the 8th rank, or the H file, or the A file, or the first rank. This is exactly what you want to do. You want to restrict them as much as possible. The fourth step will be cornering your opponent. So in this particular case, you're going to corner them either on these two squares or on these two squares. And that is what is important. And depending on where your opponent's king has been cornered, you are going to move your pieces accordingly. In that part of the game, you're going to put your king on these squares, where your knight was initially supposed to go to when extracting your opponent. Now this is where your king is going to go to. So in that particular case, you're going to make sure that your bishop is on this diagonal or this diagonal, blocking your opponent's king from escaping. Your knight belongs on either this square or this square, depending on where your king is. And finally, to the last part, which is conversion. When converting, the knight is likely to come to these two squares, and the bishop is coming to this square to checkmate your opponent in the corner. But usually some people like to make the mistake of going for it immediately and losing the tempo, allowing for the king to escape this side. So what you do is, if you cannot give the king a check immediately, if it is not on the dark square, you wait for it to come to the dark square, and then you give it a check with a knight. And once it goes in the corner, the bishop comes in and checkmates. So if you're not at that point of checkmating your opponent by giving it a check and then checkmating with the bishop, you just waste a move. It's called a delaying move. You just wait. As you wait for your opponent to come back from the corner, now you can check them and checkmate them with your bishop. To summarize everything, I'm going to show you what I mean in this game. Just follow through as I go through the steps. So you can see the first step here is in play. You have to corner your opponent in the right corner, which is the dark square corner in this particular case. Now you have to extract the king from the corner using the knight and the bishop. After that, you start zigzagging with the knight, and then you restrict your opponent using the bishop. After that, you take your opponent's king in your bishop color diagonal, and then you just proceed to checkmating your opponent. So here I'm going to quickly demonstrate how you can go about winning this position. So first of all, we're going to move our king, as we initially said, restrict our opponent. So what we want them to do is go into that corner, yes, and then check. And now we're going to bring in the bishop. Obviously, it's going to go in the corner, and now the knight has to come in. So I'm going to bring in the knight first. When he goes in the corner, I'm going to check him. And now the bishop and the knight are going to now start restricting him. You have to perfect now the out of the delayed move. So you have to just play a waiting move, and then you block your opponent. And then after that, we're going to bring in the knight just so that we can restrict him. So this is a different case. I'm just going to quickly show you how you restrict your opponent here, right? So here you're going to bring your bishop first in the center. And the idea for this is when they come here, the knight can come and block access for them to go this other side. After this, you're going to bring in your bishop. And now your knight is going to come in. And after this, your knight blocks. Your king comes here. And then now he's just forced to go this other side. So now here we're restricting him. We're going to delay with the bishop. And then block. Now the knight is going to come here. Check. And then here, then the bishop is going to block that square. And then after he comes here, the knight is blocking this square. So now that we've blocked all his access to any of these squares, we can bring in our knight, our king closer, play here. And then after this, notice that we cannot check with the knight at this moment. So what we do is, because if you went in with the knight, you would just immediately draw, and this would be very painful. So here now we're going to delay the move. We can go forward or backwards. I'm going to just come here, and then after they come here, I'm going to play h6 check and c6 checkmate, and that is that. So it is as simple as that. Just follow the procedure. So that was a little bit of a complicated process, and I can just quickly explain that so that in case you encounter that, you know how to deal with it. So at this moment, when your opponent, instead of going back here, which allows for us to check him and then follow with a king, when your opponent goes away from the f8 square, it can be any square at this moment. It can be this square, it can be that square. Like, it is just dependent on the position, right? If they move away from our tactic, what we need to do is bring back the bishop. As you bring back the bishop, the point of bringing back the bishop is to cover this diagonal. You're covering this square. And if he comes up at any point, you're going to bring in the knight, blocking him access from these two squares that allow for him to escape. And whenever you do that, he doesn't have an option but to start coming back to where he came from. And now when he starts doing that, we're going to bring in the bishop into the center. The bishop into the center. Blocker his access to these diagonals. And now he can't come and run away from this other side, so that we don't have to start over again. And after that is done, now we're going to bring back the knight here, and you're going to start with repeating the zigzag pattern. Let me just show you like an example of what happened in this game. So here the king is trying to escape. We've already blocked this square, so now we just have to block these other two. We bring in the knight, and after that, the bishop comes in, blocks his access to all these squares. After this, now we bring back the knight. So what options does he have right now? If he goes here, you just move your king closer. If he goes there, your king gets closer. Goes there, your king gets closer. So obviously it's not going to do that. So it's going to come back here. When he goes there, your king gets closer. If he goes there, now your knight goes in there and blocks. If he goes there, then you play there. Then here you delay. The delayed move, you can go even here. It doesn't matter as long as you just controlling this diagonal. After that, now you block his access to that square. After I place here, now the knight goes zigzag, back and covers this square. He goes back, check. Here, the king gets closer. He doesn't have an option, he can't go this side. So, after it goes there, you bring the bishop here, and wherever I place, so here is trying to escape. Again, you bring your knight in, you block his access to that square with the knight, and after this, now your king goes to those squares we talked about. And after this, now, you remember you cannot check him with a knight. The first check should always be with the knight here. So you delay with the bishop, and after the king gets closer, where you can now check it, because after this check it can't go anywhere but in the corner, and now the checkmate is delivered. So it can be as simple as that. You can't complicate these things. Just keep it simple. Always go back to the pattern that you know. Because at times, yes, you can go over the pattern and then you can confuse things and you have to start over. And you always have to remember, if it reaches move 50, the game automatically draws. So you always have to avoid overcomplicating things. Just restrict your opponent appropriately and then proceed to winning the game.